giving me this wonderful opportunity to share some of these films with you. I'm especially excited to share Desert Fury with you. I don't know how this film has escaped being a cult classic, and I have always enjoyed introducing people to this film and sort of watching them pick their jaws up off the floor. I'm very interested to see what you will think about this film. It's also especially great to see it on the big screen, and I'm excited to be seeing a 35mm print. It's doubly atypical for a film noir. Not only is it not set in a city, it's set obviously in the West, but it is filmed in glorious Technicolor. It's one of a small group of films from the 1940s and 50s that are considered color noirs, most famously Leave Her to Heaven, which we'll be showing later in this program. And in both of the films, this kind of gorgeous, saturated color and kind of luxurious backgrounds create a kind of unsettling counterpoint with these very dark and kind of ugly stories. The reason I was so interested in this film for my book is the way that it treats the associations of the desert and the West with, all of the kind of mythic American associations that they have, and this kind of sense of it as a place of purity. And what we see in this film is a West that is thoroughly tainted by Eastern crime and money and modern industry and social snobbery and so forth. So I'm interested in the setting, but of course, I also certainly agree with my friend Eddie Muller, who will be here later in this program, that he called this perhaps the gayest movie to come out of the classic Hollywood studio era. But what makes it, I think, so interesting is, like other films like Gilda and Laura that have these sort of queer themes, films of this time could not openly depict same-sex relationships or desires. I mean, according to the production code, this did not exist. So even though certain things may seem obvious to us, to our eyes, the way they're presented in films is always profoundly ambiguous and confused and mixed up. And film noir, I think, is all about ambiguity and the sort of blurring of boundaries and about a sort of loss of certainty. And so I think that's one of the reasons why these themes often turn up in film noir. And this is a film that blurs a lot of boundaries, including genre. I mean, obviously, I do consider this to be a film noir, but it's also a Technicolor melodrama, kind of a Douglas Sirk type film. It's also kind of a contemporary Western. It is a film that invites perhaps the label of camp. There's a lot of face slapping, and it's a fun movie. But I do also want to argue that there is this kind of serious film in here as well, with some complex and dark themes about control and dominance in relationships. And there's this kind of paradox, which I think is essential to the heart of this movie, of the way all of the characters crave power and control and freedom, and yet are strangely drawn to people who dominate them or by whom they're kind of enslaved. And so there are all these sort of relationships that are about power. And pay attention to the way that the rodeo appears as a kind of metaphor throughout the film, and the whole idea of sort of breaking an animal keeps turning up as a metaphor in discussing the characters and the relationships in this film. And I want to just briefly mention some of the contributors. It is an interesting group of people involved in making this film. The screenplay is by Robert Rawson and A.I. Bazarides. It was based on a novel by Ramona Stewart. Bazarides had written the source novels for They Drive by Night, Thieves Highway, also worked on the screenplays for Nicholas Ray's On Dangerous Ground, another great non-urban noir, and Kiss Me Deadly. And what all of those films and Desert Fury have in common is an obsession with cars and trucks and driving. And there's a lot of driving around in this movie, but nobody ever gets anywhere and nobody ever gets away. So that kind of imagery, and especially the imagery of cars as weapons, is something Bizarities liked a lot. Both he and Robert Rawson would later be targeted by the House Un-American Activities Committee for their alleged communist ties. And there doesn't seem to be anything particularly political about this script, but all of Rawson's best scripts are about the link between ambition, power, money, and corruption. And you do see that a bit in this film. And the sort of classic noir theme that success, there's no success without somehow kind of selling your soul. The main force behind making this movie was Hal Wallace, who was a producer who had his own unit at Paramount and very much styled himself as a star maker. And he had a pretty good track record. A lot of the people in this film were his own kind of discoveries, and he created this kind of stock company of actors. He was notoriously obsessed with Elizabeth Scott and was known for demanding that directors give her more close-ups and more screen time. But this was her first color film. She looks like $1 million. Even her hair kind of looks expensive in this movie. It was Burt Lancaster's third film to be released, but actually had originally been planned as his debut. And it was the film debut of Wendell Corey, who I think never had a better or more interesting role than he has in here. He plays Johnny. But my favorite performance and my favorite character in this movie is Mary Astor as Vice Queen Fritzi Haller. And she really loved making this movie. She was all of 41 at the time, but she had already been really pushed into these kind of sweet and insipid mother roles at MGM, and she really said she enjoyed the chance to, as she said, use all of my accumulated bitterness and bad temper and do a little exploding. And she is playing a mother here, but with a big, big difference from the other kind of, Little Women and Meet Me in St. Louis mothers. She is fantastic in this film. The director, Lewis Allen, is someone who tends to be neglected because he really he doesn't fit into an auteurist interpretation. There's no one style to his films. They are, I think, kind of uneven in quality. And he got sort of tracked into making these sort of tough guy crime movies with Alan Ladd, Appointment with Danger and Chicago Deadline. And those films are okay, but I think all of his best films really are melodramas, often kind of gothic melodramas with central female characters. Including his debut, The Uninvited, a wonderful ghost movie, and one of my favorite sort of gaslight noirs, So Evil My Love. So this, he was in British, by the way, so this is a very different setting for him, but it does, I think this melodrama was really what he excelled at. And lastly, I just have to tip my hat to the Edith Head fashions in this film. She was, of course, the head of wardrobe at Paramount. This is one of her best films, I think. She gives every character a really distinctive look.